there, y'all. I'm Juliette Miranda of the Unwritable Rant podcast, and today I want to share with you my top 5 whiskeys of 2018. Now, before we get to the list, let me tell you how I made my choices. There was absolutely nothing scientific about it.
But I don't remember any time where people were standing in denial of what science was.
Instead, I sat down and I took a look at everything that I've had to drink over the past year, and it's a terrifyingly long list, but I was able to kind of whittle it down a little bit to those bourbons and whiskeys that I just kept coming back to. The ones that, had something interesting going on, that tasted great, that were fun, and I got it down to these 5. Now, I try to give you kind of a range here. There's value bourbon, there's splurge bourbon, there's some kind of interesting stuff in between. I hope y'all enjoy it. So, first on my list is Larceny Bourbon from the Heaven Hill Distillery in Bardstown, Kentucky. This is what I like to call a starter bourbon. It's very similar both in flavor and price to Jim Beam and Maker's Mark, but for me, it kind of edges both of those out because it's got this wonderful smooth flavor. And that's why you're going to see a lot of bartenders using this as the starter in a lot of craft bourbon cocktails because it's so smooth and easy to drink. It's what's known as a wheated bourbon. And I'm going to get a little technical on you here because I want to tell you about the mash bill. The mash bill is essentially all the grains that are mixed together to make a bourbon or a whiskey. And you've probably heard the phrase, every bourbon is a whiskey, but not every whiskey is a bourbon. It's the mash bill that makes the distinction. Because for a bourbon to be a bourbon, it needs to have at least 51% corn in that mash bill. And for it to be wheated, well, wheat has to be the next highest grain in the mash. So the mash bill for Larceny is 68% corn, 20% wheat, and 12% malted barley. This is going to give you a bourbon that's more sweet than spicy, and that's why it makes a great mixer, because you can throw it in Coke, you can throw it in ginger ale, or you can drink it straight. So I would highly suggest bringing this to any of your holiday parties. Everybody's going to love it. So I've got a rye whiskey for you next. It's from Whiskey Acres Distillery in DeKalb, Illinois. This is a seed to spirit distillery. That means everything happens at their distillery. They farm the grains, they distill them, they age them, and they turn them into bourbon and whiskey. Now, their rye whiskey is made specifically for people who may not necessarily be fans of rye. The head distiller there was telling me that they worked really hard to find the perfect rye grain for their whiskey. It makes this really smooth, wonderful flavor. Now, check out this mash bill. It's 75% rye and 25% corn. Traditionally, you would think that that's going to give you a really big peppery flavor, but it doesn't. Their rye is so smooth and really nutty, so you get this perfect balance of nutty and sweet. It's super easy to drink, makes a great mixer. Now, if this sounds like a rye you want to try, here's how you can get it. If you're in Illinois, most Binny's Beverage Depot places carry it, but if you're not in Illinois, go to your local liquor store and ask them to carry Whiskey Acres. They're a great small business. It's awesome to support small distilleries, so please check them out if you can. So those first 2 bourbons were great if you are new to bourbon and whiskey. Really easy to drink. But now, let's kick things up a little bit. I have barrel strength Bullet Bourbon as third on my top favorite whiskeys. Here's why. It's uncut, which means it is a potent, big-time flavor, and it's 119 proof. So what it does is it takes the classic Bullet flavor, and it's not diluted. No water, nothing. You just taste a whole lot of bourbon here, y'all. It's also high rye, so that's going to give it that peppery flavor, that really huge, spicy, sort of gingerbread, holiday flavor. Really, really fun. I recommend drinking this with a little bit of water. It just opens it up, makes it easier to sip, and it's going to blow you away. All right, this might be my favorite bourbon ever. Truly, it is the most perfect bourbon flavor, and it comes from Blanton's Single Barrel. Blanton's is aged 9 years, so spending those extra years in the barrel really do something special for it. You get more oakiness out of this one. Plus, it's got this cool sort of orange chocolate flavor with a little bit of raisin sweetness. It's the perfect balance of flavors, and it's a beautiful bottle. Now, it is a little bit more pricey, but it comes with something kind of cool. These bottles all have unique stoppers, and if you're like me and a little insane, you collect them. And they're all really cool. They're all just a little bit different. They have a cute little horse on them, and down in the corner there's a letter. And if you collect all of them, you're gonna spell out blends. And I know it's totally silly and ridiculous, but I like it. I only have 3 right now. Hopefully I'm gonna get more soon. Closing out my list, I have my Grand Splurge Bourbon. It is Orphan Barrel Rhetoric 24 year. At $120 a bottle, it definitely has a little bit of a price tag to it, but this is the perfect alternative if you want a really good aged bourbon and you don't want to drop a fortune on something like Pappy Van Winkle, because with this, you're gonna get that really huge oaky flavor that's just so warm and interesting. And what I love that Rhetoric is doing is they're releasing this bourbon sequentially. So they started with the 20 year, and every year they're releasing another version of it. So it's been a lot of fun for me to try all the different bourbons in the range. Now I've had 20 through 25, but I'm calling out the 24 specifically because it's just the perfect flavor for me. This is a high corn bourbon. It's about 86% in the mash bill, but spending all that time in the barrel really just deepens the flavor. And I'll tell you, the first thing I tasted was chocolate.
My mom always said life was like a box of chocolates.
And then it just mellows out and you can sip this. You don't need ice, you don't need water. Seriously, it's the most fun bourbon I've had all year long. Now, as a side note, the 25 year just came out. I've had it, I enjoyed it, but it's a little different than the 24 because now you're starting to taste that kind of barrel-y, woody sort of flavor. And I've heard conflicting opinions on whether or not Rhetoric is going to release any more after this. So if you find a bottle of the 24, try it. If you find the 25, try that too. Have fun with it. All right. I know I said that this was a top 5 list, but come on, there's a lot of bourbon in the world. So I want to give a special shout out to Barrel Bourbon. Barrel is known as an NDP. That means they're a non-distilling producer. Don't let that sway you. What they do is seek out the best bourbons and whiskeys that they can find, and then they blend them. And they release them in special batches. They're limited, but they are always really good. They just released batch 16. It's kind of mind-blowing. It's got that aged flavor because it's a blend of 9 and 15 year bourbons. So you get that robust flavor. It's got a little bit of coffee to it, but not bitter. And you get a little bit of a ginger flavor to it. It's such a cool holiday drink. I just had to call it out because it's really delicious. Well, I hope you all enjoyed my favorite whiskey and bourbon of 2018. Now remember, bourbon is meant to be enjoyed. I keep using the word fun in this video, and I really mean it. I treat bourbon and whiskey the same way I do food. It's all about finding the flavors that you like. So everybody's gonna have an opinion. Now these are my personal favorites, but I know y'all have your favorites too, and I would love to hear what they are. So please share them with me in the comments and I'll drink them, and I'm sure I'll enjoy them too. Cheers y'all, and happy holidays.